Oh,
Yeah, exactly.
hour and 15.
Tell him about it, right?
When you from? You know.
Hernando County.
Oh, well,
Hernando?
Yeah,
well,
Where is that?
not
it's
compared to
way
you.
up there someplace.
Near
That's-
Georgia.
Don't worry about it. We only get 50% of the taxes, back to the region.
Well, unfortunately, we're not compared to you, but that's relative. Yes. And thank you for driving.
It's.
Yeah.
See,
I'll-
and
I'll
that's
take
why we
money,
need public
tolls, whatever.
transit. That's why we need public transit. So we
Yeah,
can get
That's
on
it.
a
That's right.
fast bus.
That's right.
Makes a difference on our quorum anyway. As you can see, we're a couple short,
Okay.
but it's your call. Just let me know. I'll make sure the mics are open now, correct? So just be aware the mics are hot and we are streaming this meeting.
Okay. Well, it's
Is
one.
there anything we're gonna have to vote on today?
The minutes, I believe, right?
The minutes was the only thing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, just that's the only scheduled action item. So. All right. Well, in consideration of everybody who's here on time, let's call the meeting to order of the Citizens Advisory Committee of TBARTA for this August session. First item on the agenda will be a roll call. Jennifer, if you would call the roll.
Good afternoon. So for present, we have Mr. Bill Roberts. We have Mr. Bob Widmar, Mr. Bill Johnson, sorry if I got it wrong, Mr. Henian, not yet, Brandy Miklas,
I don't see.
Karen Schwartz, Lynn Gruber White,
Present.
and then virtually we should have Carlene Wright. And then Mr. Clinton Nguyen is also present virtually.
We see you there, Clinton. Thank you.
See him. And then also for completeness, there is Karen Mullins, Josh Frank, Nicole Rice, Richard Balcom, Rick Richmond, Robert Esposito, Sarah Calhoun, and Travis Norton.
Are all of
So,
those present virtually?
no, those are not present.
That's just committee members.
That's just the committee members that
Okay.
you asked to be read.
All right. Well, good. Well, thanks everyone for coming. The next item would be virtual presentation, but without a quorum, we cannot approve that. So we'll move into public comment. Is there anyone signed up either in person or virtually for public comment today?
We have no public comment.
No public comment.
No public comment today. All right, we'll close the public comment portion. Our consent agenda would be the approval of the minutes, which requires a quorum. So we will defer that, although it seems unlikely we will have a quorum today.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
just even though we don't approve it on page 2, I had a question or a Scribner error.
okay.
Would you like to take that up or?
I think it'd be appropriate to enter it in, yes.
Paragraph 4 starts out, Mrs. Mullins questioned what the criteria is for placing a bus route as a corridor. And maybe it should say on a corridor rather than as a corridor.
Okay.
I'm not sure what.
I don't know if Karen Mullins is on virtually. I don't think so, to correct.
She is
that.
not. Either way, we can make that grammar change.
Let's make that correction. Good point, Mr. Johnson.
Where'd you get the minutes?
Okay, any other comments on the minutes? Let the record show that Randy Miklas has joined us. Thank you.
I went to the
All
agenda.
right, traffic, I'm sure.
And there's.
And Mr. Chair, Bob Henyon's arriving as well.
Bob Henyon is arriving. So good.
There's a package. No, I only got two attempts.
6, 7.
Bob, come on in.
Yeah, this
We've already counted you as present, so
is this.
we have a name tag up.
You're next to
Right
Brandy.
here.
No, that's not urgent. That's not.
Yeah.
I can skip down.
That's all I got. But. if I go to-
Colleen Reese is joining us online.
I mean, the TBARTA.
Jennifer, just so you can note.
I'm sorry, who is that?
Arlene Reese has just joined us online.
Okay. Okay, Bob, welcome.
Thank you.
We just passed the public comment portion of the agenda, Bob, and we're going to move now into presentations.
Okay. I'll go ahead and take it away. So thank you, Mr. Chair. WSP has been conducting an RRT study on US 19 from State Road 52 in Pasco County down to the planned Gateway Intermodal Center in St. Petersburg in the south. In mid-July, we presented the analysis results of 2 alternatives to the study's executive team. That exec team consists of staff from the Pasco and Pinellas MPOs, from PSTA, Go Pasco, Pasco County's Office of Economic Growth, as well as FDOT. As I said, at that exec team, we presented on 2 alternatives. One is a high investment alternative and the other one is a low investment alternative. Christina Kite from WSP is here to give you that same presentation that was given to the exec team. I will tell you that based on the discussion that we had at that exec team meeting, WSP has since that time been looking at a variation of those 2 alternatives that were presented, and she'll get to that at the end of her presentation. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Christina.
Thanks, Brian. Good
Welcome.
afternoon. Thanks for having me today.
Thank you for coming.
See if this works. No space bar. Let's see. Let's try this one. Oh, sure.
Clicked into it.
All right, try it again. So as Brian mentioned, we presented this to our executive team made up of the agencies here in Pinellas and in Pasco County, with Ford Pinellas, Go Pasco, PSTA, and the Department of Economic Development in Pasco as well as the MPO here in Pinellas. So we went through this discussion, reviewing the alternatives with them, which included some design assumptions that got us to some preliminary cost estimates that we're still working on, and a preliminary evaluation of the cost effectiveness from an FTA perspective. This is the phase we're in. So as Brian said, we've been working through this study for a little while now. We started with the station area evaluation, really refining where the station area is located along the 35-mile corridor, based on a plethora of different criteria, looking at anything from mobility connectivity to the community connectivity as well. And then we looked at the alignment evaluation, which brought us to those 2 alternatives that we were evaluating through round 3, which is where we are now. So to go through those alternatives with you, alternative 1 is where we start with the low investment. The corridor is broken into 4 different segments geographically, because it is very different throughout that corridor. The first segment 1 of the corridor is from State Road 52 to State Road 54 in Pasco County. And the low investment alternative, it was evaluating mixed traffic. So really utilizing the technology such as transit signal priority, queue jumps, things of that nature to really enhance service along that portion of the corridor. but no preferred bus lane of any sort. It would be in mixed traffic. And that continues in segment 2, which is also in Pasco coming into Pinellas County from State Road 54 to Nebraska. And that's assuming the same mixed traffic with TSP, transit signal priority, and queue jumps. Segment 3, which brings us to that elevated portion of US 19 in Pinellas County. That is where we evaluated for that low investment alternative bus on shoulder. So as some of you may already be familiar with, using that bus on shoulder option when when it's highly congested and speeds are really low, less than 15 miles per hour, giving that bus an option on the shoulder to really move passengers. And then segment 4 was the connection from US 19 really to the Gateway Intermodal Center, the future Gateway Intermodal Center. And that was also in mixed traffic for the low investment alternative. So getting into the high investment alternatives, what are the differences between those? Looking at the exact same segments. You look at segment 1 from 52 to 54. We evaluated what's called business access transit lanes or BAT lanes. So it's assuming that there is the actual preferred lane for a bus, for a premium bus option, but it also still provides those turn lanes. So if you're familiar with the Sunrunner project, you still have the availability for folks trying to access businesses to use that lane when appropriate to make a turn. But it's still giving some level of priority to the bus. From 54 to Nebraska, you have the same assumption, utilizing those BAT lanes. And I'll add, you're still using the TSP and queue jumps that we assumed in the low investment alternative too. So you still have that technology. For segment 3, that's where we have a freeway bus rapid transit, very similar to the I-275 RRT, I'm sure you all are very well aware of, that's giving that lane on the freeway for that elevated piece for the bus. And that would require some restriping, and I'll show you some of that design in a little bit. And then in segment 4, it would be continuing on in mixed traffic, utilizing Roosevelt Boulevard to get to that Gateway Intermodal Center. So those are the 2 different alternatives. A few things just to make you aware of that we also looked at from that transit modeling perspective. We did make some updates from a background bus network perspective to improve operations. We looked at modifying a few of the routes in Pinellas County, Route 19 and 34, which is currently providing local service at US 19. And we also took the routes converging currently at PSTA and shifted them to the Gateway Intermodal Center. And these are really consistent with, again, the assumptions made with the RRT project for 275. Another piece of evaluation that we did to just see if there were optimization opportunities along the corridor, we looked at a single route. So really just going from State Road 52 all the way to Gateway, single alignment, and with the 15-minute headways, so giving it that premium option with a vehicle fleet of 6 to 8 vehicles would be required to provide that service. But then we also looked at another option called Scenario B, where we did 2 overlapping routes to see if there was any benefit from a ridership perspective, gaining more ridership and providing some kind of route layering. And what we found was, and just so you know, it would continue those 15-minute headways, but there is a piece of that overlap that would provide a little bit premium headways with 7.5-minute headways, just really where the overlap is between Drew and Nebraska. But that would require a larger fleet to provide that kind of service. So you're also talking about a larger capital cost. But we wanted to see if there was the potential to get some kind of bang for your buck for that kind of service. So just to give you a comparison and to step through the table, you have alternative 1, again, just as a reminder, the low investment scenario. You have scenario A and B, and then we did the same thing for that alternative 4, which is the high investment. And you have the A and B comparison in front of you now. As you can see from a ridership perspective, when you keep all of the headways the same and you look at the same number of stations, the same hours of operation, you aren't getting much more ridership. kind of layered option. So we wanted to evaluate it just to see if it was something that was a potential opportunity, but we really would recommend just sticking with the one route 52 to Gateway. This is just providing a little bit of additional data from a boarding perspective to understand where a lot of the riders are coming from. One thing that, just to note, you can really see a lot of the station boardings are happening in Pinellas. It is denser, and it is attracting quite a bit more ridership along segments 2, 3, and 4 for the most part. So looking at the designs, before we get into some of the cost assumptions, this kind of is just to give you an idea, showing the typical sections in a rendering format, so you can see what I'm talking about when I'm referring to the different segment alternatives. So this is what's out there today in segment 1 from 52 to 54. You have basically 4 lanes in each direction with a 5-foot bike lane on each side. And this is, I will just note, this is a typical section. So this is what's predominant along that portion of the corridor. There are areas where you might have 3 lanes going southbound or 3 lanes going northbound, but this is the predominant portion of segment 1 is this 4 lanes in each direction. When we look at alternative 1 for the low investment alternative, it's in mixed traffic, so you don't see much change except we have the bus. However, in alternative 4, you can see in the high investment bat lane alternative, you can see where we provide that preferred transit priority along in the 4th lane in each direction. Moving on to segment 2, very similar in from a typical section standpoint of what's out there today. You have the 4 lanes in each direction, 11-foot lanes. Alternative 1, we would actually make a few adjustments and then make it for mixed traffic, similar to the section segment 1. And then in the high investment alternative, just like we just saw before, you would have a bat lane option in that extra lane. Getting into the elevated portion of US 19 in Pinellas County. You can see there's quite a bit more lanes here. You have the 4 12-foot lanes in each direction, as well as a 10-foot lane on the inside here. From an existing conditions perspective, one of the options from a low investment alternative perspective is that bus on shoulder. So providing the 12-foot shoulder operations during this times when there's slower speeds along US 19. And this is assuming that we would be maintaining the 12-foot general purpose lanes. For the high investment alternative for Freeway BRT, this actually reduces the lane widths to 11-foot general purpose lanes. And I do want to draw attention, this would require some FDOT approvals, some design exception approvals. Our goal was to see what we could do within the footprint available, because obviously widening on an elevated section is going to increase the cost significantly. So this is really trying to see what we can do within the available footprint. And so this design is really assuming that it's fitting within what's there today. But it does, if allowed by FDOT, it would provide 15 feet for a Freeway BRT lane.
I'm sorry, say that again. It would provide what?
A 15-foot BRT lane.
Okay.
Let me see if I can go back here.
11-foot traffic light.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
thank you.
And
If approved.
just the question, this assumes there's no widening of the MSE walls.
Correct. Yes, this would not be going, yeah.
Because if you go back a couple slides to where it's 5 lanes wide and you say that's existing conditions, I don't recall seeing that as an existing condition. It's usually 3 lanes wide with a shoulder on both sides.
Well, there would be no shoulder on the outside in this assumption, though.
In the yes.
In
but if you
this
go back to
alternative.
the existing Tampa Road, the East Bay,
No,
shows 5 lanes existing.
412 and 110, correct.
And where does that exist today?
Along the elevated portion of US 19 from Nebraska to East Bay. Now, I will say this is also this is assuming that the elevated will continue on to Nebraska.
Oh,
So,
that's a big assumption.
yeah, well, so that's in the plans. You know, part of what we did in our initial evaluation was look at existing plans on the books. And that is one of the plans, is to take that to Nebraska if that's what's causing.
I have a question about ridership. Where did those numbers come from?
For our forecasts.
Their forecast. Did you do interviews? Is my thing? Yeah. Did you talk to any potential riders?
No, not at this stage. We basically do model runs at this stage of evaluation for feasibility to see what level of ridership we would get for the different alternatives. And that's based on socioeconomic data and everything else that's in the actual transit model.
Okay, because I really do wonder about that kind of stuff. I'm real concerned about the Sunrunner. I mean, I know we're not talking about that, but I'm real concerned about the Sunrunner because I've heard I'm excited about it, but I've heard a lot of real naysayers, and I don't know what's going to happen. That's all.
Are you through with your
Yes, I'm through.
conversation? I'd like to get back to the conversation I was having.
Okay,
Before-
sorry.
When I drove down 19 today, I didn't see 5 lanes.
Okay, I can go back and look at that, but we'll pull
I
our
saw
CAD
3
files.
lanes and 2 shoulders.
Mm.
So I just wasn't, there's occasions where there's a turn lane added, but
We can definitely go back and look at that, Bill, for sure, and see if this is depicting the correct laneage. It's definitely the correct width that we looked at, and I'll see if I'll go back with our designers and see.
If I can jump in, maybe you could check with Eric at the back. Because I think what Bill's getting at, if you compare the drawing on the top, the schematic on the bottom, I think is great.
Yeah.
yes.
Mhm.
Shoulder on
Oh.
inside, outside.
I think-
But the way it's falling.
Oh,
And it's showing a vehicle within the 10-foot. Yeah.
so shoulders on both. sides.
But in terms of the geometry, the widths.
There. I think it's the rendering, and the vehicles that it's showing.
Go ahead. Sorry for the interruption.
No, you're good. Going backwards just hung up the slides. Give me one moment. I don't know what the trick was to get it to go forward. Did hit the back button to go back. Lovely, thank you. I think we went over that one. And then we get into segment 4, which is really looking at the mixed traffic options. So in existing conditions, you have along Roosevelt, the 3 11-foot lanes in each direction. As I mentioned, it doesn't change in the low investment or the high investment alternatives. So we're looking at mixed traffic for both of those, for both of those alternatives. And then along Ulmerton, again, this is just getting you to the Gateway Intermodal Center, taking a few of these different roads. You have the 4 12-foot lanes in each direction, and you have that 5-foot bike lane as well in the existing conditions. And then in the alternative assumptions, we wouldn't change any of that. That would be retained, and we would be operating mixed traffic for both alternatives. And then following along all the way to get to Gateway, you have the 4 12-foot lanes in each direction and the 5-foot bike lane continuing on. And you'll see in all the low and high investment alternatives, we're continuing that assumption just with mixed traffic. I had talked about technology earlier on. The assumption for our technology that builds into our cost assumptions was the transit signal priority, pretty much at all signalized intersections at this point, this early in the feasibility. That's 35 different locations. And then queue jumps at some of the major locations or areas where there's some congestion at intersections where we really feel that it would be needed at this time. So the capital cost estimates is initially presented to the executive team have been broken up into segments just to give an idea of what are the kind of the kit of parts, so to speak, what components or a menu are considered in each segment to build up the costs. And this was our first initial assumption. As Brian had mentioned, we're going to be reevaluating that and making some changes, and I can kind of note to where some of those changes are going to be occurring. But in segment 1, you have, again, this is just still showing the 1A, 1B, 4A, 4B, since we did work that up for each one. And segment 1 is 18 million in the low investment and 88 million in the high investment. And you'll see a lot of those costs too are looking at, widening at the queue jumps, which is a major cost. We have right away, which is pretty much done at a very high planning level at this early feasibility study. Vehicles, we're considering light maintenance facility needed to support the service, professional services. These are all FTA required cost elements. Segment 2, just a little bit more in cost, mostly for some of that roadway widening. You can see a huge chunk of that too is, or a large portion is that widening at queue jumps again. And then the same components, considering the red lane treatment, right away vehicles, light maintenance facility, professional services. A few aspects too, where you'll see some of those higher costs that we're working on and kind of recalibrating at this time. The station costs, we kind of went all in on stations. We're coming back a little bit. We don't need the biggest and best stations. So we're going to be cutting back on some of those costs. I would also say, there's the vehicle costs are high. We're going to work on that. And we're also looking at red lane treatment. One of the things that we heard from the executive team was perhaps red lane treatment isn't the best course. It is higher cost, and there's the maintenance piece of the red lane treatment as well. Continuing on to segment 3, the low investment is 20 million, whereas the high investment at this point was 78 million. And then for segment 4, that mixed traffic option in both alternatives going to the Gateway Intermodal Center was just a little over 10 million for the low investment and just a little over 16 million. They're very close, obviously, a little over 16 for the high investment. This is just to give it all to you in one picture so you don't have to do all the math yourself. Looking at each segment, you can kind of compare between the segments what those costs are looking at. Again, they're going to be coming down because we're really reevaluating some of these elements, so please keep that in mind. But you can see from a comparative standpoint between the low investment and the high investment alternative. And this also helps from the perspective of putting together a hybrid alternative, for instance. We broke it up in segments because you may want certain low investment alternative solutions in portions of the corridor, whereas other portions of the corridor based on boardings or ridership, you may want a higher investment. So that's part of the reasoning behind providing this to you in that menu of options, so to speak, by segment, and then looking at it corridor wide as well. We are also providing the annual operating and maintenance costs. That's another very important factor for maintaining a service like this. And it feeds into that FTA criteria as well for cost effectiveness. So this is our first, and I will mention this is really focused in on the cost effectiveness. This was that first piece that we wanted to look at. There are certainly other FTA evaluation criteria that we're working on right now. But our first swath looking at the cost effectiveness, we really would like to get to that $10 mark where you see it highlighted there, total project cost per trip. Really want to be in that $10 range to get to that medium score. So right now it's low. I will say, just as we're recalibrating some of this, bringing some of those costs down, and making some additional modifications, we are definitely getting closer to that. So keep that in mind. But this is where we initially were as we presented it to the executive team. This is going back to the station boardings, which I had alluded to earlier. You can see that I mentioned looking at hybrid alternatives, looking at variations. You can see where the boardings are certainly higher along the corridor. So one option that I know that Brian has been coordinating with Pasco on is cutting it off at Moog, where there is an extensive Moog Road in Pasco County. There's extensive redevelopment occurring there. We know that that's kind of the breaking point where you start to get a lot more boardings in the service. So we're going to be running an alternative to take back to the executive team that considers the same, oh, bless you, same factors, but cutting that service off at Moog, which is basically segments 2, 3, and 4. This is just further explaining that, showing the original evaluation results. I mentioned in phase 1, we had ranked a lot of the stations. We started off with 44 stations along the entire corridor, more than we knew we wanted, right? But the way that we narrowed those down initially in phase 1 was through this process on this slide where you can see the ranking of these. And what's nice about this is it does actually line up with what the feedback we're getting from the committee and some of the ridership results. And you can see that just even from a station evaluation perspective, Moog Road is still in that very good category. So it is a great end of line station. So one that, we're going to be evaluating again to basically be the end of line to see how that performs for the route. And this is just showing you on the map exactly where that's located here.
And wrap it up. So where WSP is now is they're doing that analysis of this new variation. We'll be coming back to the executive team. We haven't set an actual day yet, but we're looking at end of August that we'll be bringing this back to the executive team.
Sure.
And that'll include the Moog, and then that'll also be looking at some updates to the cost estimates, which I mentioned, just based on the feedback. We got great feedback from the committee in our last meeting to help work that through.
Good. Okay, questions from the committee? Mr. Johnson.
Going back in some of the beginning ones, just was confusing a suggestion. You say that segment 3 and 4 splits at Ulmerton Road, but it shows that you cut off at Roosevelt rather than going all the way down to Ulmerton.
Oh, sure. So this is, let me get back down here. I'm gonna show this slide just for the visual from the map that it shows. So Brian had mentioned in our last executive team meeting, that might have been some of the confusion. This was we had 2 alternatives, alternative 1 and 4. So there were some other alternatives in between. So to go back to this, this evaluation process, to kind of fill in that hole for you. The second stage of our evaluation was the alignment evaluation. And that was focused on looking at 3 options to get to Gateway. So Ulmerton was one of those options. And it didn't perform as high as Roosevelt. Roosevelt scored the highest from a station, from a ridership perspective.
Okay, so it's really.
It was originally to Ulmerton in our study description, and then Roosevelt was just one of the options, and now it's to Roosevelt to Gateway.
Okay, just kind of confusing to me.
It's a
there.
good
Oh.
catch, but yes, that's what happened earlier on.
The other question, I think, was on the cost effectiveness and competitiveness chart. I think it's page 31.
There we go. More.
It shows that the high investment cost effectiveness per cost per trip is lower for the high investment than it is for the low investment if you look at 1B and 4B.
So that's because, so you have the cost is one factor, but the other factor is the daily and annual ridership you'll see above that. So you're getting significantly more ridership and the high investment too. So it's a calculation of all of those factors to actually get to the cost effectiveness rating.
Okay, thank you. I didn't
course.
understand that.
And there are other factors too, as I mentioned. So FTA looks, this is one very critical factor, but I will just mention there's quite a few other factors too. Land use, redevelopment, mobility, things like that too, that all go into making a good project. So this is just one factor that we initially looked at with the executive team meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm going back to, I'm sorry for the interruption earlier. So how exactly do you calculate ridership?
So that we have a actual transit model where you put in, like I mentioned, a lot of the socioeconomic data. There is the acronym is totally
Well, the model
TBRPM.
is called the FTA stops model.
Yeah.
That is the model that FTA uses for projects that if you want to compete for funding through their capital investment grant program, they have the model which they've made available to local government agencies using what's called the stops model and basically forecast the ridership projects.
And then we utilize a lot of the local data too. So forecasting what the actual population, jobs, employment, and all that is gets put into that model as well.
But do you talk with people? That's my question is, do you actually have conversations with residents, workers and stuff?
Well, and there are a number of factors that go into the model, different types of quantitative factors. One of the factors, one of the input models, economic data, and one of the sources for that are onboard passenger surveys that transit agencies conduct where they get feedback from passengers. And those responses are incorporated into the model.
But those are people who already ride.
Correct.
What about folks who you're trying to attract to take a bus rather than drive it?
Well, you have to understand that even if you talk to them, that you have to somehow quantify it and put it into a model that predicts how many people are going to use the service.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't mind, if you go forward in a study like a PD&E or you do further evaluation, that's when you would do some more public involvement. So you would take an actual alternative or a preferred alternative and you would have a conversation with the public too. Like this is kind of the first step in a feasibility study to see where you line up from a technical perspective. Is it feasible in the first place?
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. That's just a big concern of mine is getting people out of their cars. Doesn't seem possible, but one can only hope.
Bob Whitmer, you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
Thanks for the presentation. Very interesting. Maybe at a 30,000 foot level, who would own this in the end? And are the counties really plugged into this at this time?
So I'll actually start with the second part of the question, just from a stakeholder involvement perspective. The executive team is made up of the agencies in each of the county, and we have certainly actually had conversations with the county staff as well. They've been a critical stakeholder as well as FDOT. From an ownership perspective, that would be one of those next steps. I'll let Brian speak to that. That would be additional coordination as far as, between the transit agencies and TBARTA as well.
Our board has made clear repeatedly that it's not their intent to TBARTA be an owner operator. buses, you know. Some of the TBARTA boards ever discussed TBARTA, for example, having its own maintenance facility on some buses. that we
Now can you hear me? So I'll repeat what I said just so that's on the recording. Our board has repeatedly said that it's not their intent for TBARTA to be an owner operator of buses. That whatever service TBARTA does operate, it would be through some type of contracted service, either with one of the local transit agencies or through a private operator. So,
And the private operator then would deal with the counties, or they would own the buses? You know?
I mean, if a transit agency contracts if they were to go, we were to go that route through a private operator, like say Veolis, you know, they're the ones who actually, well, I don't want to get ahead of myself. David, you might be more knowledgeable about contracted services than I am.
What the board said was that we would not directly operate service. We would own the service, we would buy the vehicles. All of the cost of the service would flow through TBARTA. TBARTA would contract the operation of the service to PSTA, to HART, to Go Pasco, to one of the local operators, or to a private operator. So we would own all the equipment that was needed in order to operate the service. They would hire the drivers and the mechanics in order to operate and maintain the vehicles.
And they would keep the revenue then?
No, the revenue would come to TBARTA because the cost of operating would come from TBARTA.
I guess that's what I meant.
Correct. So it'd just be like PSTA. They keep the fare box revenue to offset the cost of the service. TBARTA would do the same. Would be a TBARTA service.
And my last question, timeframes.
For this feasibility study in and of itself, we are going to be going back to the executive team at the end of August. We are on deck, hopefully still to go to the board, TBARTA board in September is the plan for this. And then at that time, there would need to be a determination to move this forward.
I mean, we talking 2030, 2035?
Oh, for actual service. So
Yeah.
you would have a few years of PD, let's see, it's 20.
Just ballpark.
Likely between 2026 and 2030, probably. Once you get past PD&E and FTA process.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sure. Questions? Anyone down here?
I have a question, Clinton Wynn.
Go ahead.
Hey, good afternoon. I know you guys have said you're trying to limit it maybe to Moog Road, but just being a longtime Pasco resident, we'd like to really see about focusing on getting it to State Road 52. Because of just, if you stop at Moog Road, there's just a whole nother area of Pasco that's just not getting service to where they can pick up the local transportation to then get to the other areas that we're trying to get, you know, the residents to for work, home, school, stuff like that. So I think that needs to be considered as well.
Absolutely.
Right. Thank you. Good point. Any comments from anyone online? Bob Whitmer, go ahead.
Yeah, just one more. You mentioned hybrid. I call it phased. Does this have to be in all at once, or could you phase it? I can't imagine that you could phase, like only do sections 2 and 4 and not do 1 and 3. To me, it looks like an all-in-one project.
That's a fantastic point. There may be opportunities to do an incremental service too. For instance, you have just another option to throw out there is you have a lower investment alternative that could get off the ground and running with local dollars, you know, whether, you know, while you're working on an FTA project for that larger scale project. So there are a few different ways that you can move a project forward like this. So it's phased and incremental that you would have to look at. And to your point, it's also the hybrid.
To give you an example of how the project might have to be phased with the bus access or the bat lanes. It may be that if you want to do a bat lane, that may have to, implementing those may have to coincide with, say, like resurfacing projects that are going on in those areas so that you can piggyback off other construction projects. And so you may not be able to do it all at once. You may have to phase it in over time as you do these resurfacing projects.
But again, I would think any roadway costs are going to have to be borne by FDOT and have to be part of their work plan.
The cost for this particular project would have to be borne by the project, not FDOT. I mean, FDOT will provide, as always, they provide local matching funds for transit projects, but this would be different from the 275 RRT. With the 275 RRT, the RRT project is benefiting from the fact that we have the TB Next program going on, and the TB Next program is absorbing a lot of the costs that the RRT would benefit from. In this case, with US 19, it's a completely different situation. We're not in the same situation as with 275.
You'd have to ask for your own grants.
Yeah.
And what's that magic word you use? RA or TA or something like this, that it'll only qualify if, I'm sorry, I can't remember the wording. It's like when you talked about, if you don't include this, you don't get to ask for the transit funding. You know what I'm talking about?
Exclusive
I'm not
lanes.
sure. Maybe David knows
Exclusive
the
lanes.
acronym.
Yeah, so like low investment alternative, not having a certain threshold of exclusive lanes. I think, Phil, you were
Yeah.
mentioning that. Yeah, it makes it harder to compete for FTA. So that would be something we'd have to, it wouldn't necessarily apply to the FTA criteria even because it doesn't apply for that.
Thank you.
Let me ask a couple of quick questions, Mr. Johnson, if I may. In your evaluation, I assume that you've settled on US 19 as the best through route to connect these different locations. Were there others considered?
The US 19 was the primary corridor we were looking at from the beginning of the study. We did not evaluate other corridors at this time.
Okay, and have you evaluated the most costly option, which is a bus-only lane being created in this corridor, or have you not even gone there?
You mean instead of a bat lane?
Yes.
No, we did not evaluate that. Some of the feedback we got early on, just from our initial stakeholder coordination was to not take lanes away, though. So.
But there is right of way to be acquired in this plan, correct?
We are not assuming significant right of way for this option. I had some widening shown for like queue jumps, for the necessary technology improvements there for the buses, but we are not assuming additional right of way for this project.
Okay, well, and I asked the question about the bus only lane because anytime the public hears mixed traffic as a description of a bus rapid transit system, they seem to have a reaction to that says this is not going to be very expeditious.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that if you take something to the TBARTA board, which you're proposing to do, you need to figure out how to message that so that it clearly explains this will be a system that will have those 15-minute frequencies and how you're going to achieve that. And my final question then would be, if you go to the TBARTA board in September, what are you going to be asking that board to do?
Basically, when we wrap up this study, what the next step would be for the MPOs to adopt the preferred option into their long-range transportation plan. As far as what we would be asking the TBARTA board to do, it would just be, at this point, accepting the results of the study.
So you don't envision at this point asking them to seek funding or to strike an arrangement with FDOT, simply to accept?
Well, like I said, this is just a feasibility study. If the board wanted to take it to the next step would be doing a project development and environmental study similar to what we're doing on 275.
Okay. Okay.
The whole point of this study was just, as it says, it's a feasibility study. It's just to see, is the idea of RRT on US 19 even feasible? The next step would be to do a more detailed analysis.
I think that lends itself to Karen's question, is what's the basis for the feasibility of the ridership? So, Mr. Johnson, you had some questions?
Yeah, I did. The The question, the timing question, there's significant construction going on US 19, north of 580 through Curlew, and then the one at least north of that, probably taking up the next 7 years. And I'm wondering how that is going to impact a pilot study where lanes, I'm sure, will be shrunk down. That the second thing is the bus stops. What kind of bus stops are you looking at? Are you looking at stops where the bus turns off the road, goes into a parking lot, comes back onto the road, or is it a simple lane cut where it pulls off on the shoulder and then people can access that?
So at this stage of the feasibility analysis, we aren't getting into the design of the stations. We're looking at very high level costs of stations that are typical. So we're not getting into the design of where the bus is going to actually access the station. That would be something you would definitely do if the decision is to move this into a PD&E though.
Just an observation, I think that's very short-sighted because a station access and back assumption has a big contributing factor to the length of the travel time for the vehicle.
Yeah.
Also, on your feasibility, you show that the Route 1934 connection is going to be relocated from the intersection of Roosevelt and 19 all the way over to Gateway. Is that correct? So if I'm taking a Route 19 from Palm Harbor down to, Pinellas Park, I would add another 20, 30 minutes to that route.
So the 19 and 34 were modified, but those were not. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Okay. So you mentioned Route 19 and 34. Those were the two that I had on the original bullet. They would be modified, but those are not included in there's 5 routes that would be rerouted to Gateway. Those are not in that grouping.
Not.
No, sir.
It stops at Ulmerton, right?
They're modified.
All the way to Ulmerton.
Yeah, there's a route modification there, but we're not changing it from converging at PSTA to go to Gateway like those routes are 11, 4, 52, 52 LX, and 58.
Okay, those are the ones moving from the PSTA here.
Correct.
Just over.
Correct.
Okay. And then one more. No, I guess those were the 3 questions I had. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Bob Whitmer, you had another one.
Yeah, just one more, and I apologize for all the questions. I'm going to jump on Karen's bandwagon here. I'm a rider. Why do I want to go from 52 to Gateway or vice versa? I don't see a sports motivation. I don't see a jobs motivation. I don't see a shopping motivation. I don't know why you're building this way.
I could jump in and say the intent is not to service people that are going all the way from 52 to the Gateway. There are stops in between. You may be going from State Road 52 to one of the stops that are in the middle somewhere. So,
but can't you get there like in PSTA? You transfer to Hart or something like that, and you get there, or is this supposed to be faster?
The intent of this study is to see if there's a way to get people faster from Pasco County into Pinellas than what currently exists today.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
And the way you get there faster is not having as many intermediate stops?
Correct. I mean, the service that we're looking at would have a fewer number of stops than I believe what is currently in service today with the US 19 express route.
So Ryan, let me ask you if it is your intent to bring this back to the CAC before it goes to the TBARTA board? Because I
Yes.
think we've raised a number of questions that
Mhm.
Christina has said are coming.
Yes,
Yeah.
And we'd like to take a look at it. before
and there'll
it
be
goes.
updates to these results too,
Right.
to share.
We'd appreciate that. Okay. Well, thank you very much. It was good.
Thank you all. I appreciate the
Obviously,
questions, really.
A lot of
Thank you.
interest, obviously.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Okay. And the next item on our agenda is our new business and our commuter services update from Ken.
Oh, I
Welcome.
believe. Do you have the same version of
You
the?
have a
Because I've
microphone?
got policy committee update as the next item.
You might have jumped ahead a little bit. I think there's a policy update and then it'll switch over to me.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chair, I'm just going to give an update on what was discussed at the July 15th Policy Committee meeting. At that meeting, the Policy Committee, there were two main points of discussion. One was TBARTA's funding situation, and the other was the CSX corridor study. Regarding TBARTA's funding situation, there was consensus among the committee members that it doesn't make any sense to keep going back to Tallahassee to request funding for TBARTA operations, at least not until TBARTA can get its house in order and speak with one voice. And this is the committee members' words, not mine. Secretary Gwynn made the observation that if one were to listen into a TBARTA board meeting, you would not hear the region speaking with one voice. Our Chair Emanuel, agreed with that sentiment. In fact, he said he believes that might have contributed to the reason why TBARTA did not get the funding from the state. On the one hand, there was no clear solution at the committee meeting to solving this problem. On the other hand, on the positive side, no one on the committee is willing to throw in the towel yet on TBARTA. In fact, Commissioner Overman from Hillsborough County said to throw in the towel now on TBARTA would send exactly the wrong message to Tallahassee, namely that the Tampa Bay region is not serious about regional transit. And so I think there was a lot of positive discussion at the committee meeting. I think there's an acknowledgement that we're in a transition period right now. We're still trying to get to a point where we are speaking as one region. We're not there yet, but everyone on the committees is committed to continuing to work on it. Regarding the other item of discussion, the CSX corridor study, the consensus of the committee was to invite CSX to come speak to the board in the fall so that the board can hear directly from CSX to what degree they would be willing to cooperate with TBARTA on this study. David has been in communication with CSX. We're trying to line up a date now for them to come speak to the board. In the meantime, the staff, we have moved forward with seeking proposals from qualified firms. In fact, the proposals were due yesterday. We received one proposal from a company called EXP US Services Incorporated. So the next step will be later this month. The review committee will be reviewing that proposal, and that is where things stand with the policy committee update.
Okay. Apologize for getting you out of order.
That's-
Any questions of Brian on the policy committee report? Bill Johnson.
The fact that the board is not speaking with one voice as a region. Can you enlighten me as to what they're seeing? Is this just Pat Kemp? Or is this that the board can't coalesce around a strategy that makes sense for the region?
I think a lot of it has to do with the controversy surrounding the 275 Regional Rapid Transit Project, and that there's not a unanimous opinion among all the board members on support for the RRT.
And did they talk about a solution to that?
Like I said, there was a lot of discussion, but there was no clear solution on how to break through this.
I have a question.
Karen, go ahead.
I thought that CSX said, no, we don't even want to talk about it.
FDOT has had two meetings with CSX. At the first meeting, CSX told FDOT that they would not be open to selling right away. However, they might be interested in leasing. At the second meeting, CSX told FDOT now is not a good time to be talking about passenger rail in the Tampa Bay area. this is what FDOT is telling us. We were not part of those meetings. I think our board, even though that I've briefed them on that, I think the board would like to still invite CSX here directly and hear it for themselves and make a decision
I
on
can understand that.
what we do with the study.
Yeah, I can understand that, but I don't know. Okay, we'll see what happens.
So has that invitation been extended?
Like I said, David's been in consultation, he's been in communication with CSX. I don't think we've arrived at an exact date of when they would be available to come down.
Okay. Any other questions about the policy?
Yeah,
Or the board meeting?
what was the proposal that, that you mentioned a proposal?
Yes.
Yeah, who submitted it?
The company's name is EXP US Services Incorporated. And the proposals, the proposal is valid for 180 days, which means it would be valid until February 9th. In effect, what that means is we have until the January board meeting for the board to make a decision on whether or not they would want to award the contract.
Canadian.
And don't you think this whole CSX thing boils down to money? You know, offer them enough and they'll do it.
I couldn't speak to that. I mean, I can only tell you what they've told us, that right now they're planning on increasing their footprint within not just Florida, but within the Southeast, that they're planning on increasing freight operations. So.
And weren't you doing or somebody doing a CSX feasibility study, because supposedly the two lines that are around here are not suitable for either commuter rail, light rail, whatever you want to call it?
No one's ever said that they're not suitable. What do you mean by not suitable? Like,
it's not my word, so I don't know
Yeah.
if they mean it's not going to where, you know, like over to West Shore or something like that, you know.
I mean, if you look at the alignment of the tracks, I mean, they don't go to the areas where that would probably be the best for a passenger rail line to go.
They're not going towards the employment centers.
Mhm.
They are freight lines that are
Right.
set up to be able to run continuously. Therefore, they don't go through metropolitan areas in such a way that it's actually connecting to employment centers.
Okay,
Oh, okay.
or like Hernando to the airport.
Nah. Yeah, good luck.
I mean,
Airport.
that makes sense, right?
Right.
Yeah.
There
Thank you.
also are not a pair tracks.
That's right.
It is a single track, correct?
So
Mhm.
that would create some challenges for any frequency
Yeah.
of service.
Correct.
I know when I visited Utah and saw their light rail or I think they were running it on heavy rail tracks
Oh,
that had been there before,
Mhm.
but there was one section that was only one track wide, and so they had to make accommodations for that situation. I just find, if I continue on.
You have the floor. Go ahead.
I find it kind of a challenge that we have the high cost of developing and implementing this run for great distances versus a bus, rubber tire vehicle, like kind of like what we talked about the last time, where you could go out and serve a larger group of people because you have less density in the Pasco and far reaches. Whereas a rail system operates most effectively where you have gobs and gobs of people.
Density.
For instance, the Chicago downtown going out to the north suburbs. And then people connect in from there. So I guess I'm a little bit skeptical that even though there's lots of development in Pasco County, and it would make sense if you're going to do something in Pasco or Hernando, that you do it before it gets all built up. But other than doing a strategy for the future like that, to implement it in the regional or in the center part of the region, I'd rather spend some of that money really increasing where the density in the center part, like the over in downtown Tampa or where there's a lot of development occurring to improve the transit. So you don't need a car.
Right,
And
right, like is it airport?
airport, yeah, airport to downtowns, airport to the beach.
Mhm,
We talked about going out to along 60 last meeting.
mhm.
It's just kind of, I don't understand.
Yeah, but actually, can I,
Go ahead.
are you done? I don't want to interrupt
Yeah.
again. Actually, what about the airport in Clearwater? Does the proposed, I should have asked this earlier, does the proposed route stop at that airport?
Are we talking about the RRT or are we talking about the CSX?
Whatever that first one
She's
was.
asking about the.
The US 19 RRT does include a stop at the Clearwater St. Pete
does.
Airport. And that was one of the, when Christina had mentioned early on in the study, we actually looked at 3 different ways to make the connection from US 19 over to the Gateway Intermodal Center. The reason why we chose the particular alignment that we did was because it does serve the airport, and the study exec team thought that was important that we go
I
that way.
could see that segment wherever you're trying to get to the airport, I could see a lot of people taking advantage of that. The other stuff, I don't know, you would take it to the airport. Yeah, yeah.
Definitely.
And if there was something from downtown St. Pete to, I've been hammering on this for years, from downtown St. Pete to the Tampa airport, oh my God, that would really make a lot of people happy. Real lot of people happy.
Yeah, if it's a question of you don't have the rail lines in place, why doesn't TBARTA buy the right of way and put those extra lines in,
Yeah, yeah.
By what right away?
for rail? Like, let's say, okay, we can't get to the airport from the current either Brooksville or Clearwater subdivisions of CSX.
Yeah.
So we pick one place and we do the tracks from there to the airport by buying the right of way and then building the tracks. I don't think I'm making a big point.
No, I don't.
No, I'm trying to visualize what right away, where are you talking about?
Well, to build a road or any place else, you need right of way, right?
Correct.
To build train tracks, you need a right of way.
Oh, I get that. I'm just trying to have, where on the map are you talking
Oh,
about?
I have no idea.
That's what I'm trying to
I don't even
follow.
know if you can get point A to point B,
Well,
but we
Probably
know,
not.
we know we want to get to the airport.
Right.
Correct, but what you're talking about is a situation where TBARTA goes and tries to condemn property and.
Maybe.
That, I don't know. I like it, but it
Yeah,
sounds dreamy.
Well, regardless of who does it, I think everybody on this committee knows that there have been several, if not numerous plans in Hillsborough County to develop a light rail system that runs from somewhere in downtown Tampa out to the DOT's identified location for an intermodal center on Cypress Avenue and the interstate.
Mhm.
There is right of way in the interstate to do that, to address your question. There is an existing conversation, I won't even call it a plan, to build something along Cypress running from downtown Tampa out to that intermodal center. The Tampa airport has been very clear that they would welcome a connection from that intermodal center to their new intermodal center, but that they're not going to build it. they don't build off airport property.
Right.
So somebody else would have to build that lane. I think what Bob is suggesting is that we ought to think differently about what has been proposed, and that we ought to consider either a BRT system or a light rail system, because the commuter system is not applicable.
Right.
And it starts somewhere in a dense area. It could start from downtown St. Petersburg and run to Gateway as the beginning. I don't know if there's right of way available in the interstate to do that, but there may be. Or it could start in Hillsborough County and run from downtown out to the Intermodal Center, and then encourage the airport to join with the Department of Transportation to build an elevated tram from that Intermodal Center to the airport.
Yeah.
I think that's where TBARTA ought to be going.
Yeah.
I've been coaxing them along in that direction, and I think the public would get behind the Hillsborough County surtax if they knew that there was something coming that would improve their ability to get around in this region, and it needs to start in the more dense areas. So that's my comment. Not a question.
No, I agree with you 100%. But didn't Hillsborough already decide they wanted to tax themselves, but we're told, no, you can't do that because it needs to be something that the county commissioner.
County commission has, I'm sorry to interrupt, Karen, but
No, I don't know exactly.
in Hillsborough, where I live, the county commission has voted to put on the ballot in November a surtax targeted for transportation.
So they're redoing it.
They're doing it over again, because when it passed 2 years ago by an overwhelming majority, or in the range of 60%.
Yeah.
One of our county commissioners sued and had the tax invalidated.
Yeah.
Now that money, some $500 million, I think, Brian, is the number, is going to be handed over to the legislature to decide how it's going to be spent on transportation. It is to be spent, according to the judge, on transportation.
Oh, really? Okay.
So
Well,
it's
Mr.
going to be
Chairman.
used for various purposes.
Sorry to interrupt, but to Karen's comment, the reason the initial referendum was struck down was because it was a citizens referendum that got it on the ballot. And the citizens wrote it to say this much goes to transit, this is how it will be spent. And the lawsuit, as my understanding, was based on a citizens referendum cannot tell government how to spend it. Only government can decide. This time, the referendum is being initiated by the county. Hillsborough County has initiated it. So it's very similar, but it's all in the origination that should eliminate that legal challenge of the first one.
I get it.
Well
Okay.
stated.
That's correct.
Yeah, it's been unclear to me what happened.
And
But
so
if they haven't spent the money on, something frivolous, that's.
So I think some of us have been hearing from our friends at FDOT for at least a decade that they will accept any plan that comes forward from the region. They will support it, and they will do whatever they can to help finance it. But they have told us repeatedly that without a local source of income
Funding source.
to help with the capital cost and to help with the operating costs, there's no chance of getting federal grants. So now we have a new administration, we have a new Secretary of Transportation, and we have a new emphasis on rail. Ken, no disrespect. And so it seems to me that TBARTA has an opportunity to rethink how it's proceeding and what it plans to do and how it wants to move people around this region. Bob, I'm sorry.
A lot of this is, I'm not sure if my mic is on.
Oh, yeah, it's flashing.
Yeah, where are you flashing?
Press it.
It is
No,
hot.
no.
You don't have to push it, but it should be red, it should be lit up and just
Press
leave
it
it.
one more time.
Yeah,
There,
leave
it's
it
red,
There you
it's
go.
red.
Red now.
It's red.
Okay. A lot of this is dependent on CSX or its agent on what they want to do. And that's something we really have to push on getting done. We don't know exactly when they're going to come and talk, but we're talking about sometime September or in the fall. And that's going to be a big determining factor on where we go with this.
Thank you, Bob. I submit that it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I do
I submit that everyone has told TBARTA that CSX is never going to do another Sun Rail
Mhm.
deal. So that model is out the window from everything that I've been told. And if staff here disagrees or has heard differently, please correct me. But that's a commuter rail model. That's a model that relies on heavy rail that runs on freight tracks. And if CSX will come to the table, and if Pat Kemp is right, that model works and they can be persuaded to do something, I think TBARTA should be a participant in that. But I also think that TBARTA has the opportunity now to go back and revisit some of the earlier ideas that were floated in the original WSP analysis, where WSP was charged with the mission of saying, what's feasible now? What can be funded now under existing federal guidelines almost 3 years ago? And that model has changed, ladies and gentlemen. And I think that this, we've drifted afar here, but this 2-page talking points that I submitted to you is intended to allow us at our next meeting to consider making some recommendations to the TBARTA board that they reconsider and add to what is currently going on. And I cannot believe that funding can't be achieved to go back and revisit the idea of a light rail network that begins in either one of the major cities. I don't care which one it begins in, but ultimately has the intent of connecting the two regions. And I believe that it can be done across the Howard Franklin Bridge. The FDOT believes it can be, and the FDOT is building that bridge capable of handling a light rail system. And if we use it for BRT, that's fine with me if it works. But we have that opportunity, and I think we need to revisit it. So that's, sorry to get on my soapbox,
No,
but that's where I think we are. But I don't know how Brandy feels about that in the long term for downtown, but I am convinced that if there is a link from downtown Tampa to the Intermodal Center, that we'll find a way to connect that to the airport. Any thoughts on that? Don't want to put you on the spot.
Well, let's see. Is my mic on?
Yeah.
It's on.
Yeah.
They're like all
Yeah.
on now. Okay. Yeah, last meeting I was like,
2018.
well,
Right.
yeah, the city, from the city of Tampa's perspective, there's been so much progress made with, I guess, in a broad sense, multimodal improvements, and some things are completely finished design wise, and we just don't have the money to implement. We don't have the money to construct. So we're finalizing a mobility plan. It's the city's first ever mobility plan citywide, and it's called Tampa Moves. We're going to be going back out because we initially spoke to folks early last year and said, like, hey, we're changing, we're growing. How do you want to get around? Where do you want to go? Kind of just like an open-ended question. And the overwhelming response we received was people want to walk more, they want to bike more, they want to take transit more, but they don't think that it's reliable or comfortable. And comfortable can be, and I think the main crux of comfort is safety and also heat and just
Air conditioning.
having shade, things like that. But yeah, the overwhelming response was like, we want to do all this more, take transit and scoot more and just like use these other options, but folks don't feel comfortable and like it's reliable. So we're really working hard on being prepared when we do have the additional funding. And then if we can help with our local transit and help HART as well with in Hillsborough County. I'm sorry, I'm very specific because, city of Tampa perspective. When we have a stronger, more robust local system, then like that's the thing that this region lacks the most. It's like, we just don't have strong local transit.
That's
So,
right.
but yeah, if we had the funding, we could implement a lot because we're prepared to implement a lot. We just don't have the funding to do so.
And that's the target of this referendum part. Yes, go ahead.
I think that what we need more than anything is the buy-in of employers. Because if employers encourage and back their workers taking public transit, that's a big difference than a person saying, okay, I'm going to try to save money and take public transit. But when that route isn't running on time and that person is late, and then they get to work and they're late and they're penalized by their employer for being late, and it wasn't their fault, they're taking public transit. But if the employer has bought in to public transit, it's different. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Well, it depends on the work situation. Some jobs, as we've learned during the pandemic, are very flexible and can be either done at home or it can be, but certain jobs are like a nursing job. You got to be there to take care of the patient. So, but if the hospital is located on a dense transit route with a bus running every even 15, as often as 15 minutes, you can do that. If it backs up, if the next one's coming along, it's not very far away. But part of that is you got to put the jobs next to the transit route. So you don't have to walk a mile. A half a mile is fine.
And I think that you made a very good point, Randy, that, you know, I'm from up north, I'm from Minnesota, and our bus stops up there they're not completely climate controlled, but they protect against the wind, the snow, the rain, so that when people are waiting for that bus to come, they are in a protected area and they're not exposed to the elements. Whereas, I mean, I drive down US 301 through Pasco County, and I've got people sitting on the side of the road. There's a bench, but there's no shade. There's no protection, all that kind of stuff. And that takes away from people buying into public transit.
Right.
And I love the fact that they want it to be comfortable. I like that description. They want it to be comfortable. And I think we need to make it comfortable to make people buy in to public transit. And now is the time, because quite frankly, we are at a point in our economy where people are making choices between putting gas in their car to go to work or putting food on their table.
Thank you, Lana. And I think that's a very important point, is the question of comfort. I too like that description. And I would, if I can speak over Brian's head to Christina a minute, I would say, work on those station designs. Come back with as much detail as you can. Don't make them skimpy. Make them comfortable.
Yeah.
If a person's going to ride a premium transit, whether it be bus or light rail or commuter rail, they're not going to want to stand out in the Florida heat or the Florida rain, waiting for that vehicle to come. I don't know how many of you may have seen this morning's Tampa Bay Times newspaper had an article by a newcomer to our region.
She's
I'm sure Brandy saw it.
Yeah, Olivia George. She's the Times new transportation reporter. They haven't had one in like a year and a half. So
So she wrote about her experience working downtown Tampa, having to leave her car unexpectedly for repairs and take the bus home to Seminole Heights. It was a minute-by-minute description. It was wonderful. Unfortunately, it worked pretty well, but she got soaked in the process because she didn't have an umbrella, and partly because there was no cover on the bus stop. So anyway, read that article if you get a chance.
yeah, well, she also got to utilize Route 1 which is Florida Avenue, which goes like, basically from downtown Tampa pretty far north. And it has 15-minute frequency. It's the only, it's like one of the only on Heart's system that has that frequent of service. So
Interesting.
She was
Still got
fortunate.
rained on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but to her credit, she said by the time she got off the bus, the rain had passed and it was a crisp, clear summer afternoon, and she walked to her house. And it was the first time she had walked to her house since she'd been here. So it was really very well written. All right, we're off subject and we've spent a fair amount of time talking about the policy report, but I appreciate everybody's input. Any other comments before we leave this? Bob Whitmer.
Yeah, just one comment. When you talk to when the board talks to CSX 4 years ago in October, we were presented the plan of 41 miles versus 9. And it shot down CSX because it was too expensive. I mean, I ate the dog food at that time and I said, okay, I'm for this. But I mean, we've been here, there's been a study, so it shouldn't be that hard to regurgitate some of that stuff and say, here's what we want to do.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, have we discussed your proposal yet?
We have not. We kind of did indirectly.
4 years ago.
I thought it was inspired. And it really says, let's get going. We have a real need ahead of us here for this this city, and we need to be serious. And I fully support that strategy. I'm not sure how we do it, but.
Well, I submitted this and I'd like the committee to read it over, give some thought to it. And at our next meeting, I intend to propose a resolution for the board.
Okay.
That might
Did
help
you say
some
that you've
folks.
written the document?
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah.
You did.
Oh, that's it. Oh, okay.
I asked,
I've been glancing at it throughout the meeting, but I plan to fully digest
Give
it
it
between
some
now
time.
and September.
okay, good. And that was the intent, was to bring forth some of the things that I've just said, is that we have some opportunities here. And I think David and his staff have been very gracious in letting me present these ideas. We'll see where they go. But I think this committee is engaged in what's going on in our region. And I think this committee would like to find a way to support our board, which seems to be, quite frankly, a little less functional than we are as a committee. And maybe if we
don't have to stand for re-election.
right, and maybe if we can nudge them in the right direction, they may take heart and take some action. So that was the idea.
Yeah, okay.
All right.
Bill, one other thing about what Bob was talking about CSX before. I think we've been jerked around for enough years by CSX in one way or another. And what I was referring to is we ought to expedite the contact with them so we get them on the books, off the books. We're dealing with them, we're not dealing with them, we're fighting with them. So it's over with instead of letting it drag on into the fall.
Yeah.
But Bob, I agree with you, but I think Josh at our last meeting raised a very important factor. And that is that CSX is in significant regional discussions with other areas, other states, Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, and Florida, about how passenger rail may or may not be adapted and utilized on their tracks. And I can't speak for our staff. I certainly can't speak for FDOT, but from what I've read, that process is going to take a while, weeks or months, not years. And so as much as we may want to push them and encourage them along, I would be surprised if we were to reach a resolution of this question before some of these larger regional issues are resolved. I don't know that, but that's what I'm reading. So. Okay. Mr. Bowden, let's go for your report.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you got a mic.
Lynn, to your point, I thought I would just say that when my colleague Arlinda or I go out to talk to an employer, there's a couple things that we really want to know in our conversations. And we really want to know, like, are they having problems with attracting and retaining employees? Do they have parking issues? And 3, do they have a green initiative at their organization? Because I think these are places where we can plug in. And so when you're mentioning this problem with transit and people that are, when the bus is late, you know, what do? And part of it is having that conversation with the employer about flex time so that when people show up 5 minutes late, they're not automatically dinged.
Right.
And those are the conversations where, you know, it's our opportunity to really kind of explain all of these different options on the table for them. I just wanted to mention that, but.
No, I appreciate that. And I mean, I even know that MTC, if they have a commuter passenger and they have a sick child in the middle of the day, the MTC pays for that person to be transported back to their home to take care of their sick child.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and that's actually something we offer too, that emergency ride home program. So, and that's good for anybody who's utilizing the bus, they're utilizing carpool, van pool, biking. When they have that emergency and they need to get home, all they need to do is record their trips in commutetempabay.com. But then save the receipt, fill out a reimbursement form and send it to us and we'll compensate them for the ride home.
That's excellent. That shows initiative to trying to encourage ridership right there.
Yeah, it's a surprisingly underutilized service. We really try to get the word out to folks. We've printed all kinds of brochures, electronic version in Spanish. And it's, you know, it is surprisingly underutilized, but it's there. It's a safety net for people to plug into. I just want to talk a little bit about where the program is at this moment. So we ended the month of July with 188 van pools. And that's a 4% increase over June. If we continue with this pace, and again, it's been 4% increase month after month, we're on track to break 200 van pools by the end of September. So if I show up here in August with 195 or 194 van pools to report, you'll know we're on track to make that number. So I'm kind of excited about that.
We'll be rooting for you.
Thank you. I also want to report that we have a new service location. The VA clinic in Newport Richey is our newest destination for people in Vanpool. Those folks start their trip up in Spring Hill, and we're glad to have them on board as well. Looking over the last fiscal year, so our fiscal year starts in October. To date, we've saved over 7.7 million vehicle miles traveled. That's almost what we accomplished last year for the full year. I think we're on pace to actually break 10 million miles traveled in VMTR, vehicle miles traveled reduced. So we're really shooting for that. To date, we're looking at a savings of over 6.7 million pounds of CO2 from being emitted into the environment. Just finally, I want to say that HART is launching a rider advisory committee. They're holding an open house for those that are interested in that tomorrow evening at 1201 East 7th Avenue in Tampa. And it'll be from 5:30 to 6:30 in the evening. I just wanted to plug them and that new committee that they're trying to set up. And I'm available to take your questions.
Thank you, Ken. Questions from the committee members?
I think you're doing a great job. And I really appreciate you.
I have to just say that we have been riding the wave of $4 gas for a while. So thank you, though.
No, I think it's a successful program, and I think you've got the full support of this committee, and I know that the TBARTA board appreciates your work. I think those numbers are terrific. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that Bob Whitmer and I were sitting in a meeting, and this program was trying to achieve 100
Right.
and we're at 188. Sounds mighty good to me. So keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Next item on our agenda is the communications report.
Thank you. I want to call your attention to a public survey we have in the field right now, and this relates to the Pinellas County area aerial gondola feasibility study. We're now in the public participation phase of that. As you know, we're looking at St. Petersburg and Clearwater. There's more reason to take a closer look at the Clearwater area. And so we have a public survey asking for the public's opinion on what do they think about the potential of an aerial gondola connecting downtown Clearwater to Clearwater Beach. Questions like, would you use it? Why would you use it? How should we pay for it? Do you work on Clearwater Beach, or have you worked? And if you did, would you use a gondola? And all this information will be included in the feasibility report. We have a pretty robust social media campaign right now as part of that. There's a little thing known as pre-roll, which is a video, looks like a commercial, but this is pre-roll that engages with people to get them to click on and take the survey. And if this works, I'm going to play this for you now.
Hey, Tampa Bay. Want a fast and fun way to get to Clearwater Beach? What if you could ride an aerial gondola and pass up all that causeway traffic? We need to know what you think. Take our survey and tell us if you want Clearwater to build an aerial gondola.
And that's what plays on for perhaps your Facebook feed. You would see this, and then it would go automatically to the survey. So far, this has been seen by more than 100,000 people in the Tampa Bay area, with an emphasis on Clearwater and secondary emphasis on those in Pinellas County. So while we want everybody in the area to take it, the way the survey is set up, for example, when we ask about funding, do you favor Clearwater tax dollars to be used for this? That's only if you've identified yourself as a Clearwater resident would you get that question. Likewise, if you say, well, I live in Pinellas County, but outside of Clearwater, you would get the question, do you favor Pinellas County tax dollars to be used for this? In addition to a number of other questions like that. Company in Sarasota known as Digisphere is doing the social media outreach for us. Would encourage you to take the survey. You can find it at tbarta.com/gondola. It's on our website, pretty easy to find under the aerial gondola, but we've done an alias for that so you can find that survey. It is open to the public through this month. You actually may see a little media on that. I did an interview with WTSP, Channel 10 News, so I think they're doing something on their morning show. But really the bulk of the outreach on this, and the reason we have more than 800 responses so far, having it out in the field just for a week, is because of the paid social media campaign, in which the video you just saw there is being put on a lot of people's Facebook accounts, Google display ads, things like that. So we're very encouraged that the TBARTA name is getting out there, and this will help with the final results of that feasibility study. I do believe that's going to wrap up later this year and be presented to the board. Similar to the US 19 feasibility study, and Brian, you can correct me if I'm wrong, this is merely being presented to be accepted. We're not building a gondola, we're not proposing a gondola, but as we were directed by the state legislature with the Innovative Transit Technology grant that we received in 2019, this is part of the funding that's going to help local officials answer some of those basic questions. And then really the study is a resource for them should they want to take a look at moving on to the next step. I'm happy to take any questions.
Good report. Questions from the committee? Yes, Randy?
So it's been live for a week and you have 800 responses?
Yes.
And you're using, what are you using again? What's the pay?
Or it's paid social media. So we're paying to place ads on Google Display. So it's not just, if I put it on the social media channels that TBARTA has, without paying to have it as a placement, it wouldn't get nearly as many responses. So it's because we have some money behind this campaign.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
No, seriously.
Thank you.
We didn't. That's a great number for a week. How long is it going to be open?
It'll be open until August. And so, yeah, we're very encouraged by it. I will tell you in our initial conversations with the social media firm, they were concerned with, well, how do we get people engaged with this? And at first they said, can we do a giveaway? Can we give away tickets or do a raffle? Or we were not really comfortable with that being a public entity. We really didn't want to go there. So we said, we can't go there. But we do know that video is a pretty powerful tool. It does get more clicks, more engagement. They came up with this short little video, but it's just enough to kind of explain it and grab your attention. And so far it appears to be working pretty well. Thank you.
Good. Yeah, that is good results. Other questions? Anybody else? Okay. I think we've talked about the CSX corridor. Do you have any further updates for that
There's
item?
nothing really more for me to add to that item. I think we've covered it.
Okay. You're welcome to add to it if you'd like, Brian. The next item on our agenda, I believe, is the items to report to the TBARTA board. Does anyone have anything they'd like to suggest that we report? I will give our committee report as I usually do. So now's your chance. I have one request, kind of a communications request. I noticed on the TBARTA website, it identifies the next TBARTA board meeting, but it doesn't identify the next Citizens Advisory Committee meeting. Could we get that added?
Yeah, we can certainly post that. I usually post that after this meeting, but we can, it's usually up several weeks in advance, but there's no reason the next one can't be posted as well.
Okay, yeah. I mean,
Yeah, I agree with you because we so rarely get public comment because people don't know what's happening. So, yeah, I think it needs to be out there before the meeting.
anything else to come before the committee? Any other? Yes, Bob?
One, if we're almost done.
We're getting there. Go ahead.
Looking at Bill's CAC vision for regional transit, I want to give a shout out to Brandy and the city of Tampa for their application that is going to merge, as I understand it, a lot of these things. When you think regional transportation or transit, yeah, buses, right? What's the other thing? Where can I go? If I don't have regional buses, how can I get from point A to point B? Oh yeah, I'll go through this application, that application, this application. If TBARTA builds an overall application that tells you how to go anywhere in all the counties from point A to point B, that's also value added. And I think it's something that we can do pretty quickly, whether it's to get on top of yours, or as I understand it, you want to move it off anyhow after the pilot.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, yeah, because we're using Move It, so anyone can download it right now, MOOVIT. And we're working with a lot of different partners. So even though it is the city of Tampa, we got funding through the state as well. So it was like co-funded through them, but it's a 15-month pilot, and it may, who knows? We have to we need to make a decision based on data. So we're hoping to get lots and lots of data and just understand what people's preferences are.
Well, my point is I'd like to see an application that you can go anywhere in the county, whether you're coming in from Tampa International or coming down to the city because you don't know where, and maybe it's got Uber as the last one. You know, I'm here, but I'm 2 miles away. Okay, how can I get there? Or send your somebody's bicycle, service, whatever.
Rickshaw.
Anyhow, that I think should be part of the CAC vision for regional transit. It's not only stuff, but software. And thank you for doing this, Bill.
Yeah, thanks.
Any other comments or any other new business to come before the committee? Anything else from the staff, you guys?
I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you for your help. Steve, thanks for coming today and giving us that report. We look forward to seeing you again next month. And I think with that, we are adjourned.
No, nuts.